939-1140.
On Sactown Sports.
1 hour down. Got 3 to go, and what better way to kick off hour number 2 than with my guy. I told y'all it was going down, and it always goes down whenever he joins us. Brett Siegel of Clutch Points joins us, national NBA insider and reporter for Clutch Points. Brett, happy Wednesday. How you doing, my guy?
I'm doing well, Alan. How are you doing?
I'm good, man. There's plenty to talk about. I had meant to reach out to you anyway about your most recent Siegel scoop, which everyone can check out at clutchpoints.com. And then yesterday happens, Brett, and all you know what breaks loose. We got Kings rebuilding talk. We have a Warriors drama as well, and everything in between with Ja. The Western Conference has a level of drama, if you will. And there's some drama going on in the East, too. So we got you, Brett, for the whole segment. And I'm like a kid in the candy store. I don't know where to start, but let's just start here, Brett. I'm sure you saw our own Carmichael Dave and the report that wasn't a report, that was kind of a report that broke yesterday, got aggregated everywhere. From your side of things, Brett, what are you hearing, and what was your take on what Dave said as far as who is available and the timeline? That was the thing for me, the timeline of December. Of course, more players will be available, but just we were talking about the parallels between what this team wants to do on the court and what the reality is off the court. Just give me your broad thoughts on all that and what you've been hearing with the Kings.
Well, Alan, I think it kind of goes back to the whole aspect of school is back in the NBA. School's back in session. We had that first week where everyone was just watching the stars go off and all these big scoring nights. It was just masking the drama that we always know and see around this time in the NBA season. And now that we're 3 weeks settled into school, we had back to school night. Now we're settled in with everything, and now we're seeing the drama appear with all these teams, specifically in the Western Conference has all the drama because of all these teams that expect to be the best and expect to be in the playoffs. And one of those teams that entered the year with playoff expectations are the Sacramento Kings. And granted, maybe they're not in the same championship picture as the Oklahoma City Thunder per se, but they have all-star talents, and this is a team that was on the cusp of making the playoffs last year via the play-in tournament. They add some really good players that have been in this league for a while, and now the expectation is to make the playoffs. Well, through their first 11 games, like you said, it's been drama-filled with a 3-8 record. And now there's rumors of them potentially tearing things down. And it kind of goes back to the offseason, Alan, of the conversations that we've had ongoing of what is this team going to look like come time December, come time for the trade deadline, and will they ultimately pull the trigger on some of these moves? And we said back then that it's very likely that they're going to look at the market for guys like DeMar DeRozan, like Malik Monk, just because they have been involved in trade rumors throughout the offseason. And now as the season progresses, this team is now 5 games below 500. Doesn't look like that there's any path for them to really get better, especially with their upcoming schedule, where they're going to be on the road for 5 games playing teams that are all competing for playoff spots in the West. So it doesn't look good right now for Sacramento, but of course the horizon's always brighter for these types of teams that have aging veterans. They have contracts that aren't necessarily notable to the franchise in the state that they are, and we're talking about DeMar DeRozan, Malik Monk, those contracts that just kind of don't go anywhere and provide much value for them. So can you offload some of those guys, bring back draft picks, bring back younger players, and kind of kickstart your rebuild like you wanted to do in the offseason with a guy like Jonathan Kuminga? So we're going to see some type of youth movement, obviously, within the next year from the Sacramento Kings. It's just not sustainable to go on with the type of team that they have with Levine, Sabonis, and DeRozan. Some type of changes coming, whether or not it's a complete overhaul and they dump everybody. I don't necessarily know if that's going to be the case. I think we're going to look to see them make one move first and then go from there.
Talking to Brett Siegel of Clutch Points, friend of the show. Yeah, Brett, when we were talking a little bit this morning, I was hoping you could kind of lay out what you laid out to me as far as let's just call it the Kings priority list, and who you think is at the top of that priority list for them to maybe move off of. Because I agree with you too, Brett. I just don't see the Kings moving their quote-unquote big three all this season. It's just not realistic. But I think myself and you were both on the same page with where that priority list starts and who that may be.
Well, we can start at the very top with Domantas Sabonis. I haven't heard anything suggesting that, A, he wants out of Sacramento, and B, that they want to trade him. So whether or not there is actual interest out there, that's something that I haven't heard at this time. Would there obviously be teams interested? Sure, but that's a big cap number to try to chase at $42 million, and he's under contract for a few more years there. So in today's NBA, where teams really don't want to take on contracts past a year or two, that's a big question mark, especially given that's the center market around the league, especially for a guy like Sabonis, who isn't the most athletic, and he's not necessarily known for stretching the court as much as a shooter compared to some of these other modern-day big men. It's going to be interesting to see what kind of market he would demand and whether or not a team would be willing to give up a lot of the assets that the Kings would want for a multi-time All-Star and a rebounding champion like Sabonis. So there's nothing really brewing on that front from my understanding. And would there be interest? I'm sure there would be. It's just about making those cap figures work, and that would be very difficult for a bunch of teams to do. And then the other question with Sabonis is, would the Kings even want to deal him to a team in the Western Conference, which I'm sure that there would be interest there, as there's been speculation. And I know that you've talked about how there's even teams in California that would be interested. I'm sure that there are. And if he was on DeRozan's contract, it would be much more interest than there potentially perceives to be. But at $42 million, and given his status with the Kings as being the number one guy that the franchise loves and that the fans love, and he's fully embraced being the Kings leader, I just don't see that being a scenario in season. Come time for next offseason, that's another discussion to have. But we're talking about this season, what moves could potentially be made. LaVine, Sabonis, those guys are pretty much locked into their contracts right now. It's very hard to move a player that's making $40 million or more ahead of the trade deadline. So we go down the list. DeMar DeRozan, that's the name that I'm really looking at of what is his next team going to be, because I do not see him playing out this season with the Sacramento Kings. It doesn't make sense for them to keep him around, especially once Keegan Murray does return from injury, because you're going to want to play Murray. They've already signaled that they want to play Nick Clifford. They don't want to give up Keon Ellis, so he's going to get minutes as well. Russell Westbrook's playing well. It doesn't seem like that they're going to take away minutes from him. So what do you do with DeMar DeRozan? And the answer there is you move him for as much assets as you can get back. He's an aging veteran. He's not a guy that's going to be a part of the future of this team. And there would be some interest out there in the trade market come time for the trade deadline, because next season he's only guaranteed for around $10 to $11 million. That's a contract that a team could bring in and look to flip for something else or simply use as a cap dump. And that's something that we saw the Golden State Warriors do a few years back when they traded Jordan Poole to the Washington Wizards for 1 year of Chris Paul, and then they ultimately dumped Chris Paul for that $30 million cap release. So we could see something similar here with DeMar DeRozan being moved before the trade deadline, contributing to a team as a rental to try to make a playoff run, and then being dumped next offseason. But that's really the name that makes the most sense to trade at this time. He's a proven star in this league, and you could probably get back maybe a young talent that hasn't worked out somewhere and needs a fresh start. And maybe that's really what the Kings front office is looking to get for a guy like DeRozan at this point.
Talking to Brett Siegel, national NBA insider for Clutch Points. Look, Brett, I told you, and I've teased it to everyone that we're having you on for the whole segment. So I'm going to make this. I'm going to make it worth it, Brett. So I got something for you off the top of my head. And look, we could talk about this. The thing about the Warriors to me is that time is of the essence. But I understand it's a big number for Domantas Sabonis. I understand that they, the Warriors, they want everything on that 2-year plan that matches up correctly. I think they might be one off with Sabonis. He'd have an extra year. But just walk with me for a second. If it was either now or we could say fine at the end of the season, Domantas Sabonis to the Bay, right? For Jonathan Kuminga, Moses Moody. Now, I don't think Buddy Hield would ever want to set foot in Sacramento again, but you would rework Buddy Hield somewhere else. Money-wise, as we know, Domantas Sabonis and his value, it would be confusing as far as first-rounders are concerned. The Warriors just wouldn't do it. But money-wise, that would work. What is your first thought when you hear that?
Money-wise, if you were to give up those three players, if you're the Warriors, it works. But now you run into a little bit of a predicament where you have 14 players under roster right now. If you're the Warriors, you trade 3 for 1. Now all of a sudden you're down to 12 guys. You bring in Seth Curry on a prorated contract. You have 13. You still have to fill that minimum slot. And the Warriors are currently over the first apron, and they're only $2 million away from the second apron. So it would be tough for them to navigate financially in season to make a trade like that. Now, if you're talking next offseason, obviously the logistics of it change with Jonathan Kuminga's contract increasing, Moses Moody's contract increasing. You have a little bit more cap flexibility to make those kind of moves in the offseason compared to in season. But it's certainly a scenario in which it would make sense when we're talking from a hypothetical angle where the Warriors have always needed a center. He's a playmaking big man, and that's the exact type of big man that has thrived in Steve Kerr's systems through the years. They don't need a guy that is athletic and can shoot threes consistently and just score at will. They need a guy that can facilitate for Steph Curry. They need a guy that can fill the minutes of the role of being a main facilitator when Draymond Green's not on the floor. So it takes an enormous amount of pressure off him, and now he can set screens, which he's the best at doing for Steph Curry. So the fit makes sense for Domantas Sabonis going to the Warriors, whether or not they would be willing to relinquish Moses Moody and Buddy Hield. In addition to Jonathan Kuminga to make that happen, that's a whole other avenue because it goes back to what we talked about this offseason of them not wanting to trade Moses Moody or Buddy Hield in a sign and trade to give Kuminga to the Kings. So there's a lot of moving pieces there. It would have to involve multiple teams because Buddy Hield, if the Warriors were even willing to move him, would not be going back to Sacramento. So it's just very hard to imagine a 2-team trade there. But again, lots of time to figure it out if that's something to happen in the offseason. But in season, I would add a layer of skepticism there. But there's certainly a lot to discuss, Allen, with the Warriors, and I'm sure that's kind of where we're going with this.
That's exactly where we're going. I led you there, Brett, so let's just get on into it, talking to Brett Siegel, a national NBA insider for Clutch Points. Brett, I know that you have a lot of information and intel when it comes to what in the world. It was all good just a week ago, Brett, literally with the Warriors. Now the vets are calling out, quote unquote, or asterisk, somebody, and there's clearly going to have to be some type of conversation internally. They have a back-to-back. They get the red-hot Spurs tonight. Anthony Slater just came out and said the guys are playing, and of course the guys are playing. This is when they got to get their W's early on because we know that throughout the season, being an older team, they're not necessarily going to continue to get healthier throughout the season. So they're all playing tonight. What is going on out there down Highway 80? What's going on, Brett?
Allen, I honestly think that they have been dealt the worst start to the season in terms of what their schedule looks like between the back-to-backs and just the road trips and how much mileage that they've already traveled this season. I mean, the Warriors have gone from West Coast to East Coast, back to the West, back to the East, and now they're on a 6-game road trip. They've only played, I believe it's like 4 or 5 games in front of their fans, and they started out hot. They were 4-1. They looked great. The vibes were high with this team. And then they go on the road for not a back-to-back, but two games in 3 days against the Bucks and the Pacers. And they lost to a Bucks team in heartbreaking fashion to a Bucks team without Giannis, and that kind of hit the locker room hard. And then they go on the road and they give the Indiana Pacers, who have been absolutely dreadful this season without Tyrese Halliburton and about 8 other guys. They lose to that team and give them their first win of the season. And then the struggles just continue. They lose in Sacramento without Curry. They get thumped in Denver without Curry. Ultimately, they win against the Pacers, but then last night in Oklahoma City, I mean, it was kind of expected. I don't think anybody really thought that in Curry's first game back from his illness, he was in bed for 48 hours. I don't think anybody expected them to be able to just turn things on and beat the Thunder, and that wasn't the case. They lost by 24 points. They were never in that game. And then after the game, we see the dysfunction kind of coming out of Draymond Green is frustrated, saying that everybody has their own agendas in this league, but some guys need to be committed to winning a little bit more. You have Jimmy Butler with his comments, and it doesn't seem like that they're singling one person out in particular. I've seen people trying to speculate that, it's Kuminga or, it's Brandon Podziemski. I think it's just a message to the group that everybody needs to be better. Everybody needs to be on the same page. And that makes Wednesday night's game in San Antonio, it's not a must-win, but this is the most important game of the season that the Warriors have had so far. Because all of a sudden, if you dip below 500 and you're now 6-7, the vibe is completely different than if you're 7-6. If you can right the wrongs and you can start to get things going in the right direction. We've said it before, winning cures everything in this league, and that was the case at the start of the season, especially when we were talking about the Jonathan Kuminga drama in the offseason. That was all forgotten because he was playing well, the vibes were immaculate, and this team was winning. Well, now the script is flipped a little bit because they've only won twice in their last 6 or 7 games. And now they not only lost to the defending champs, but now they're playing the San Antonio Spurs, who are right behind them in the Western Conference. These are the 2 best young teams in the West. And if you lose back-to-back games against them, maybe they even lose 3 games because they have 2 straight games against San Antonio. If they lose all 3 of those games, you're going to see just frustrations continue to mount. The veterans are going to be mad, and there's going to be major questions about if this veteran team can actually compete anymore in the Western Conference. Because if you lose to those 2 young, emerging championship-like organizations, the Thunder already winning one, the Spurs looking like that they're going to be there for a long time to come, where does that really leave your team? And that's really the big question facing the Warriors right now, is they still kind of try to mingle with that 2-timeline plan that they have going on.
Talking to Brett Siegel. And Brett, all right, I gotta move forward. We got rules in Sacramento. Can't talk Warriors for more than about 30 seconds. Can't talk Lakers for more than about 10 seconds. So I'm already getting crushed. So let's bring it back to the Kings here. But I want to take this approach when it comes to the Ja Morant stuff. What have you heard about Ja Morant? And as far as the Kings are concerned, Carmichael Dave, we were going back and forth yesterday about whether the Kings would get enticed to go back to the well of distressed stars. And to me, I don't know, Brett, I can, I joke about the Green Goblin mask, and they're going to see Zion, or they're going to see Trae Young, or they're going to see Ja Morant, and just say, well, if we tweak one thing here or there, then maybe we can make it work. Carmichael Dave seems to think that they might not be able to move on from everyone right now, but they will not buy in deeper to this experiment that they have. What have you heard on that front, and what are you hearing out of Memphis as far as Ja Morant is concerned?
So Ja Morant's situation has been the number one storyline around the league. It's what everybody's paying attention to with the Memphis Grizzlies, to see if his relationship with Thomas Isolo has actually been repaired, or if this is just a front that they're putting on, because there was that heated locker room discussion in the NBA Cup loss to the Lakers. We reported on it on Friday at Clutch Points in our latest intel story about Ja Morant and the festering drama there in Memphis, where Isolo basically called him out in front of everybody at halftime and singled him out, said, you need to be a better leader. You need to inject energy into this team. Despite them leading by 14, Isolo did not like the way that they closed that half, and so he took it upon himself to target Morant. And he's not afraid to do that. He did that in the EuroLeague with his team. He holds players accountable, and he wasn't going to stand for the lack of effort that he was seeing from his star. Did not sit well with Morant. He did absolutely nothing pretty much the rest of the game, and you could see that he was just completely out of it at that point. He was sitting by himself on the end of the bench at times. He wasn't even looking at the coaching staff. And then after the game, there was another heated locker room argument there where Isolo again called him out, and Morant called back the coaching staff, and they said that they need to be better and did not like the fact that some of the substitutions were taking players out when they were hot. When the coaches left the locker room, players came up to Morant, and we're supportive of him in most of the points that he brought up, and we're backing their star player, which causes even more questions about, has Isolo lost this locker room in Memphis? Is it repairable? Those are the questions that people are asking right now. But as far as Ja Morant goes, I have not heard anything suggesting that the Grizzlies are, A, making him available in trade talks, and B, they're not fielding calls for him at this time. There have been teams that have inquired about Morant and have asked about him, and they have been met with a firm no from Zach Kleiman that they are not making Ja Morant available. He has not requested a trade from Memphis, so we're kind of stuck in this purgatory state, Allen, of not really knowing what's going on with Memphis at this time. Are they just kind of saying that to see how things go leading up to the trade deadline before they make a final decision, or are they firmly saying that Ja Morant is their future? They still believe in him and Jaren Jackson Jr., and this is the direction that they're going. But as far as the Kings go, that's obviously a scenario that would make a lot of sense if Ja Morant was to be moved. Scott Perry has shown interest in Ja Morant previously before he took the Kings job, and there's always been talk about the Kings needing a point guard, which is ironic because they traded 2 all-star point guards over the last 3-4 years. But if you bring in Ja Morant, if he wants out of Memphis, and you're able to get him in a package that includes DeMar DeRozan and Malik Monk and maybe a first-round pick or 2, why wouldn't you do it if you're the Kings? Because you're taking a chance on a young, budding superstar point guard who has dealt with some off-the-court drama, but there's no denying that through his first few years in this league, everybody was pegging Ja Morant to be one of the next faces of the NBA. And so if you're able to bring in a talent like that and kickstart your short rebuild, in quotes, I think it makes a lot of sense for the Kings. But there's multiple avenues this could go. Whether or not Ja Morant actually wants out is the big question at large. And there's still a lot of basketball yet to be played in Memphis. We just mentioned it with the Warriors, how there's a lot of basketball yet to be played and winning cures all. Same thing with Memphis. Even though that they're just 4-8 right now, if they go on a little bit of a run, all this drama will kind of go away, and the focus will be on the fact that they're winning. So just really depends on how the next few weeks go and heading into the new year, what this team looks like, and if there's any more of these locker room interactions with Isulo and Ja Morant. But you also mentioned Zion Williamson, and that's an interesting situation with the New Orleans Pelicans in the Western Conference right now, where they're kind of sitting at the bottom of the standings, 2-8. We did reporting extensively at Clutch Points. It was myself and our Pelicans reporter, Chris Dodson, reporting that Willie Green is on the hot seat, that they have had internal conversations about moving on from Willie Green, even though Joe Dumars, when he was hired this offseason as the EVP of the organization, he came out and said that Willie Green will be the head coach. All the speculation that he was going to be fired after the team moved on from David Griffin, it was false. They fully believe in him. Well, 10 games into the season, those conversations are ongoing, and they currently face a game tonight against the Portland Trail Blazers on their home floor. And there are heavy rumors coming out of New Orleans that if they lose this game and it is not close, then Willie Green will be potentially relieved of his duties ahead of 4 more games against prominent Western Conference teams like the Lakers, the Warriors, the Thunder, and the Nuggets, because Gail Benson, the owner, wants to steer the ship in the right way. She expects this team to be competitive. Granted, they've suffered injuries to Zion and to Jordan Poole early on in the season. DeJounte Murray potentially returning early 2026. They still believe that at full strength, this team can be competitive. And if Willie Green is deemed not the right guy to lead them in that direction, they will not be afraid to make a move after tonight's game. So that's really the update that we have coming out of New Orleans at this point. There will be more information on that, obviously, depending on how they play tonight and what things look like on the sideline, because I'll tell you this, Alan, the vibes have not been good in New Orleans. The players don't seem to look like that they respect Willie Green. He doesn't seem like that he's had the locker room dating back to last offseason. Zion Williamson, it doesn't look like really cares about what Willie Green tells him on the sidelines when he checks out a game. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this plays out, especially in tonight's game against the Portland Trail Blazers.
Brett Siegel, one more for you. Talking to Brett Siegel, NBA Insider, National NBA Insider, and reporter for Clutch Points. Great stuff so far, Brett. One more before we get you out of here. You know, Brett, there were things said from a certain insider about how crazy this offseason was going to be, and it did not live up to its expectations. And some people like to have some jokes about that. I think some moves didn't get made. It was just moves that we already expected to be made. Looking at what is going on, and yes, there is a mess in Sacramento, but there's a mess all over the place. I mean, there are a number of teams that just don't know what's going to happen, disgruntled stars, this, that, the other. Do you think that this trade deadline could have a level of movement that we haven't seen? Or is it just really early? A lot of people want stuff to talk about, just like myself, who have to talk about the Kings or whoever for 4 hours, and things are going to kind of cool off a little bit, and maybe you end with a DeRozan and I don't even know, a Zion level, somebody else getting moved. How do you think this NBA trade deadline could shake out? Because it seems like it's hot to trot right now, Brett.
You know, it's funny because I was just talking with a West executive about this last night about, hey, what's your early thoughts on the trade deadline? What is this going to look like? Because we're seeing some of the drama start with some of these teams. We've seen the struggles of teams like the Pelicans, the Kings in the West, and teams underperforming their expectations. What do you think it's going to look like? And the simple answer right now, and it's kind of dumb, but it's we don't know. And the reason for that is because there's no clear shot to getting star players anymore with the way that the CBA works. And with all the financial restrictions in place and teams trying to dump salary and avoid these apron lines, will a team be willing to do what the Phoenix Suns did and go all out with a big three and hard cap themselves in the second apron? Are teams willing to do that anymore? And it doesn't seem like that's the case. So now you're carrying one, maybe two big contracts and really filling out the rest of your roster with depth. So now we're going to see guys like DeMar DeRozan go from being a starter to maybe being a sixth man on a playoff team and being in different rotations. And that's what makes this trade deadline so unique, because teams are going to be targeting depth instead of stars, whereas in the past, it was always, what is the big star on the market and how can we bring him in to pair him with our other star? That philosophy and that line of thinking doesn't exist for about 25, 26 teams in this league anymore. They're all focused on how can we surround our all-stars with the best capable talent to compete in a Western Conference that's run by a very young team that won a championship last year, not just because they had the MVP of the league, but because they could go 8, 9, 10, 11 guys deep in the playoffs and find success with all 10 or 11 of those guys. So that's kind of where my mind is at with the trade deadline right now. And that's why when you look at all these trade hypotheticals and you're trying to put stuff together and look at what teams can make moves, it's very hard to say right now because you don't know, A, what these teams are going to look like after the NBA Cup and after the new year passes, as well as, okay, what stars are actually going to become available and what roles, more importantly, are available around the league.
Brett Siegel, great stuff as always, my friend. We can't wait to have you back on again. I'm sure there will be plenty of reasons to do so. Be sure to check out all of Brett's work. It is outstanding on Clutch Points. There's a Laker AD story coming out that Brett was telling me about. Be sure to check that out. Follow him on social media. Brett, I'm sure we will be talking to you in the near future because things keep changing. Enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll talk to you again soon.
You got it, Alan. I appreciate it. Thanks.
When we return, let's break down everything Brett had to say. Also, the Kings aren't the only team with issues. How can they take advantage? Allen Stiles, Sactown Sports.
Tonight, Kings and Hawks.
Tip off at 7. Your exclusive home for Kings basketball.
Is Sactown Sports 1140.
This Sactown Sports 49ers report is being brought to you by Kia of Vacaville, located beside the Vacaville outlets. San Francisco falls at home to LA on Sunday, 42-26. Matt Stafford, a huge game for LA. He threw for 4 touchdown passes in the victory. For San Francisco, they fall 2 games back of LA now in the standings. LA and Seattle